Imagine you're sitting on your couch, right?
Yeah.
It's 2 a.m, and you are just endlessly doom scrolling on your phone.
Oh, the classic late night trap. Definitely.
Yeah, right. Or think about the last time you were stuck in a waiting room or just alone in your apartment and your phone dies.
Panic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That creeping, crawling anxiety you feel, that sudden, desperate need to be distracted by literally anything.
Yeah, it's a very specific, very uncomfortable feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, what if I told you that a 17th century French mathematician diagnosed that exact sensation 400 years ago?
It is wild to think about, but he absolutely did.
He realized that the human mind is just utterly terrified of its own silence.
Terrified of being alone in a room.
Right. And today, we are going to dive deep into that. We're going to tear apart the engine of his mind to see exactly how he mapped that terror.
I cannot wait.
So we're looking at a text called the Pensées.
Which just translates to thoughts, right?
Exactly. And it is one of the most peculiar, raw, and just structurally chaotic masterpieces in the entire history of Western philosophy.
Chaotic is definitely the right word for it.
So tell us a bit about what this text actually is. I mean, what are we dealing with here?
Well, originally, Blaise Pascal intended it to be this massive, bulletproof defense of God, an apology for the Christian religion.
Aimed at who, exactly?
Aimed squarely at the skeptical, worldly, highly educated intellectuals of 1600s France. A Parisian elite, basically.
Okay, so he's trying to convince the skeptics.
Right. But here is the massive catch. He never finished it.
He died before he could put it together, right?
Exactly. He died quite young. So what we are left with is this massive collection of his surviving fragments.
Like just scattered notes.
Literally thousands of notes. Brilliant little essays, half-finished paragraphs, and sometimes just single sentences jotted down on scraps of paper.
Which honestly makes reading it today feel incredibly modern.
Oh, totally.
It's almost like reading a brilliant philosopher's scattered Twitter drafts, you know?
Yeah.
Or like a really disorganized folder of voice memos.
That is a perfect analogy.
But before we get too deep into the psychology of it all, we should probably set some ground rules for our conversation today.
Yes, that is very important context for the listener.
Because Pascal's ultimate goal with all these notes was defending 17th century Catholicism.
Specifically, his very rigorous brand of it.
Right. And our goal today is not to convert anyone. We aren't here to debate the theology itself or take sides on any religious doctrine.
No, not at all.
We are simply here to objectively explore the fascinating intellectual architecture of his arguments. We want to show you how he built this conceptual machine.
Exactly. We're looking at the mechanics of his thought process without necessarily endorsing the theological conclusions it was designed to produce.
Because the material is deeply embedded in the religious and political warfare of his specific era.
Oh, absolutely. The fierce battles between the Jesuits and a strict reform movement known as Jansenism. It was incredibly heated.
But to understand why he was writing this apology in the first place and why it cuts so deeply into human psychology, we have to look at the man himself.
We really do. Blaise Pascal was not a cloistered monk.
No.
He wasn't a traditional theologian either. He was arguably the greatest scientific prodigy of his century.
And when we say prodigy, we are not talking about a kid who was just, good at his multiplication tables.
Not even close.
Born in Clermont, France in 1623. And his early life was pretty tough, right?
Yeah, he lost his mother when he was just 3 years old. And his health was chronically fragile his entire life.
So his father, Etienne, kept him home and educated him entirely by himself.
Right. But his father actually tried to ban mathematics from the curriculum initially.
Wait, really? Why would you ban math for a genius?
He was afraid it would overtax the boy's mind before he had properly mastered Latin and Greek.
Oh, wow. That backfired entirely.
Completely.
Yeah.
You cannot bottle up that kind of genius.
Yeah.
Pascal essentially reverse-engineered geometry on his own.
Okay, explain that because it sounds impossible.
Well, by age 12, having never read a math book, he was found drawing shapes on the floor with charcoal.
Just figuring it out.
Right. And because he didn't know the proper Greek terminology, he just made up his own words. He called lines bars and circles rounds.
That is amazing.
And using just his own logic, he independently formulated and proved the first 32 propositions of Euclid.
So he just reinvented classical geometry in his playroom.
Exactly. His father was so stunned he literally broke down crying and finally gave him a copy of Euclid's Elements.
Which I'm sure Pascal just devoured.
Read it like a novel. And then by age 16, he wrote a treatise on conic sections.
That's the geometry of cones intersecting with planes, right?
Right, and it was so incredibly advanced that René Descartes, who was the leading philosopher and mathematician of the age, flatly refused to believe a teenager had written it.
Descartes was jealous.
Oh, absolutely. Descartes was convinced the father must have secretly authored it.
That jealousy is so telling. It just shows how disruptive Pascal's mind was. And he didn't stop at abstract math, did he?
No, he was an engineer at heart. He wanted to solve physical, real-world problems.
Right, like when he was 19, his father was appointed as a tax commissioner.
Which meant endless, agonizing manual calculations of these massive ledgers.
So, to save his father time, Pascal just casually invents the world's first fully functional mechanical calculator.
The Pascaline.
The Pascaline. And let's break down how revolutionary this was.
Please do, because it's hard to grasp today.
He didn't just conceptualize the idea of a calculator. He had to physically build it. He had to figure out the physical mechanics of carrying a remainder.
Right, the actual moving parts.
Yeah, like if you add 9 plus 2, the machine has to mechanically shift the next gear over by 1.
Which requires immense precision.
Exactly. He used these gravity-assisted levers to make metal gears perform what is essentially cognitive labor.
It was the literal dawn of computational mechanics. He built a thinking machine.
And from there, he just kept going. He laid the foundational groundwork for probability theory.
Oh, the gambling dispute.
Yes. He was corresponding with another mathematician, Pierre de Fermat, trying to solve what was known as the problem of points.
So essentially, if a game of dice is interrupted halfway through, how do you mathematically divide the stakes based on the probability of who would have won?
Right. And before Pascal and Fermat, people just thought gambling was purely random. Governed by fate or luck.
Not the gods.
Yeah. But Pascal proved that randomness actually has a mathematically predictable architecture.
He tamed chance.
He tamed chance. And then he shattered the physics of his day, too.
The vacuum experiment.
Yes. For thousands of years, scientists followed Aristotle's rule that nature abhors a vacuum.
The establishment firmly believed that empty space was physically impossible. They thought matter would always rush in to fill a void.
So Pascal sets up these massive glass tubes filled with mercury, and he has his brother-in-law physically carry them up the side of a mountain.
The Puy de Dôme.
Right. And he proved that the level of mercury dropped as you went higher up the mountain.
Which demonstrated that it wasn't nature hating a vacuum at all.
No, it was the physical weight of the atmosphere pressing down on the liquid. He discovered atmospheric pressure and proved that a true vacuum could exist.
So you really have to consider the mind we're dealing with here.
It's an incredibly empirical mind.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is a man who operates purely on measurable data, empirical evidence, physics, and ironclad deductive logic.
He is a giant of the scientific revolution.
Which is exactly why what happens next is so profoundly shocking.
The paradigm shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
November 23, 1654.
The event known in history as the Nuit de Feu.
The Night of Fire. Pascal is 31 years old. He has experienced the heights of scientific fame. He's mingling with aristocratic gamblers in Paris.
But he is feeling this increasing, creeping emptiness.
Right. And then for 2 hours, between 10:30 at night and 12:30 in the morning, he experiences something that completely shatters his reality.
It was a mystical illumination.
A direct, overwhelming, and deeply personal encounter with the divine.
And we know exactly what it felt like, because as soon as it ended, he grabbed a scrap of paper and furiously scribbled down the experience.
This document is the memorial. It's identified as fragment 913 in the modern editions.
And the raw emotion in those words is just staggering. I mean, it literally begins with the single word, fire.
Just fire.
And then he writes, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of the philosophers and the scholars.
That distinction is so crucial.
He goes on, certainty, feeling, joy, peace.
Notice how he says, not of the philosophers and the scholars. Pascal, who's the ultimate scholar, realizes in that exact moment that the abstract, geometric, logical God of academic philosophy is useless.
Like the God Descartes wrote about.
Exactly. That abstract God brings no actual comfort. What Pascal experienced was a visceral relational presence.
And this experience was so defining for him that he copied the words onto parchment, sewed it into the lining of his coat, and wore it over his heart every single day for the rest of his life.
That is just incredible devotion. Whenever he got a new coat, he would unpick the stitches and sew it into the new one.
His servant only found it after he died. That is how tightly he held on to that night.
It wasn't just a phase.
No, he completely allied himself with Port Royal, the epicenter of the Jansenist movement.
And for those listening who might be unfamiliar, Jansenism was a deeply austere, rigorous movement within French Catholicism.
Very strict.
They believed heavily in original sin, the absolute depravity of human nature, and the sheer necessity of divine grace.
And they were locked in a bitter, high-stakes theological war with the Jesuits,
who offered a much more accommodating, optimistic moral theology.
So Pascal steps right into this war, anonymously writing the Provincial Letters,
which was a masterpiece of biting, satirical polemic.
Oh, he made the Jesuits look utterly ridiculous.
He really did.
Yeah.
But the Provincial Letters were just a defense. He wanted to build something constructive.
Right. He wanted to take all his genius, his math, his psychological insight, his fiery faith, and construct an apology that would force those skeptical Parisian intellectuals to their knees.
That was the Pensées project.
But his chronic illnesses finally caught up with him.
Yeah, he suffered from terrible stomach ailments, neurological pain, and just debilitating headaches.
So he died in 1662 at the age of 39, leaving the work entirely unfinished.
Which brings up a massive logistical problem for us today.
Huge problem. Because if you die in 1662 and leave behind literally thousands of individual scraps of paper, how on earth do we read it?
Right. Are we just projecting our own modern narrative onto a 17th century Rorschach test?
Exactly. Because for a long time, editors just grouped the quotes chronologically or by whatever theme made sense to them.
Completely smoothing out his abrasive edges to make him sound like a standard theologian.
They ruined the actual flow of his thought.
They absolutely did. But we are incredibly lucky because around June 1658, Pascal realized he was dying, and he actually tried to get his affairs in order.
Oh, the bundles.
Yes. He took his large sheets of paper, cut them into horizontal strips so each thought was on a separate slip, and organized them into what he called liasses, or bundles.
He literally punched a hole in the corner of the papers belonging to each specific theme and threaded a piece of string through them to tie them together.
So the modern editions we use today, like the Lafuma edition and the Cellular edition, they go back to that original string.
They respect the physical bundles he created.
They preserve what scholars call the first copy order. And what experts point out is that the fragmentary, nonlinear style isn't just an accident of his death.
It reflects his actual methodology.
Exactly. Pascal wrote that he composes in the order of the heart rather than the mind.
So he doesn't build a linear, step-by-step logical staircase?
No, he writes by centers. He circles an idea, throwing out these abrupt, devastating psychological insights meant to jolt you.
He wants to disorient the reader.
Totally. And his entry point for that disorientation is absolutely brilliant.
Because if you want to convince an arrogant intellectual to find God, you don't start by quoting the Bible.
No, they would just laugh at you.
Right. You start by attacking the one thing they trust completely, themselves.
So, following Pascal's bundled string, we begin with a ruthless, surgical deconstruction of human vanity.
He goes right for the throat.
He does. He begins by looking at the social world, the hierarchies that we take so incredibly seriously.
How we bow to nobles, we respect wealth, we defer to authority.
And Pascal argues that these social conventions are essentially absurd theater. They have no actual grounding in natural justice.
Right. He has this incredible essay on imagination listed as Fragment 44.
Oh, that is a fantastic section.
He calls imagination the dominant faculty in man, master of error and falsehood. And his examples are so vivid.
Walk us through one of them.
Okay, so he asks you to picture a magistrate sitting in a courtroom. The magistrate is wrapped in these flowing red robes, swaddled in luxurious white ermine fur, sitting high up on a carved wooden bench.
Very intimidating.
Exactly. Or picture a 17th century physician wearing an oversized gown, a square cap, and speaking in Latin.
When we see that, our imagination immediately assumes these men possess profound wisdom and essential justice.
But Pascal points out the mechanical reality behind this. If these men actually possess true justice or the genuine, infallible art of healing, they would never need to put on a costume.
Right. The sheer majesty of their actual science would command respect on its own.
But they don't have that, so they have to use vain theatrical props, the fur, the robes, the elevated benches.
Precisely because their science is imaginary.
Right.
It is a masquerade designed to strike the imagination of the public and bypass reason entirely.
It's all visual trickery, though I find it fascinating that he makes an exception for soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
He says soldiers are the only ones who don't need to disguise themselves in academic gowns because they establish their authority by actual physical force.
The sword cuts you, whether you believe in its authority or not.
Exactly. But the intellectuals, the politicians, Pure theater.
In reason, this faculty we are so incredibly proud of, he shows how hopelessly fragile it is.
The fly example.
Yes. Pascal gives the example of the most venerable, wise judge in the world, sitting in his chambers, trying to make a profound ruling on a matter of life and death.
And if a single fly starts buzzing around his ears,
His mighty reason is completely unhinged. The intelligence that rules over kingdoms is paralyzed by an insect.
it's hilarious, but it's deeply disturbing. It reveals this devastating civil war within human nature.
Pascal maps out how the two main principles of human truth, our reason and our senses, do not just fail, they actively sabotage each other.
Right. The senses deceive the soul with false imaginative appearances, like how a calm mind can be thrown into panic by a sudden loud noise.
Or seduced by a visual illusion. But then the soul takes its revenge.
Our passions and our prejudices distort what we physically see. We only notice the evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs.
We are, as Pascal diagnoses, subjects full of natural error.
Which sets the stage perfectly for one of the most famous psychological observations in the entire text, Fragment 47.
Ah, his views on time.
Yes. Pascal looks at how we experience time, and he realizes we have a fundamental inability to exist in the current moment.
We just can't do it.
He writes, "We never keep to the present. We recall the past. We anticipate the future as if we found it too slow in coming."
We are so unwise that we wander about in times that do not belong to us and do not think of the only one that does.
We literally flee the only reality that actually exists.
And this is exactly why Pascal is universally recognized as a foundational figure for existentialist philosophy.
Because he's writing this in the 1650s.
Right, perfectly anticipating the anxieties that would dominate the 20th and 21st centuries. He recognizes that we never actually live. We only hope to live.
We constantly tell ourselves, I will be happy when I get that promotion.
Or, I will be content when I go on vacation next month.
We treat the present merely as a stepping stone to a future that, by definition, never actually arrives.
But why? Why are we wired this way? If the present is the only thing that is real, why are we so desperate to escape it?
Because the present hurts.
It does.
If you strip away your memories of the past and your fantasies of the future and you just sit perfectly still in the present moment, you are forced to contemplate your true, unvarnished state.
You have to face your mortality, your extreme vulnerability, your insignificance in the grand scheme of the cosmos.
And that realization brings a crushing, unbearable dread, so we thrust the present out of sight.
Which brings us to what might be the most penetrating concept in the Pensées, the idea of diversion.
Yes. If we cannot bear to exist in the present, what do we do with our time?
We invent distractions.
Pascal delivers this completely brutal diagnosis in Fragment 136. He says, "The sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room."
Just think about the mechanics of that statement.
Right. If you place a human being in a room, completely alone in absolute silence, with zero tasks to accomplish,
They will inevitably slide into despair.
boredom is not just a mild annoyance for Pascal. Boredom is the terrifying sensation of your own nothingness creeping up on you.
It is the existential void making itself known.
So to fight off that void, we pursue diversion. Pascal points out that we go hunting, we play tennis, we gamble.
We chase after public office, we go to the theater.
And the brilliant twist is that we don't do these things because of the inherent value of the prize.
No, not at all.
When a man spends all day hunting a hare, he doesn't actually care about the meat. He wouldn't buy the dead hare at the market if you offered it to him.
He cares about the chase, because the chase requires all his attention and prevents him from thinking about himself.
Diversion is a symptom of our wretchedness, not a cure. We use it as an anesthetic.
We pursue the chaotic noise of society to numb the pain of our mortality. And Pascal makes it clear that this applies to everyone.
Right up to the absolute top of the social hierarchy.
Take a king, the most powerful, wealthy person in the land. Pascal notes that a king is constantly surrounded by a massive entourage of courtiers.
Why? What is the actual job of a courtier?
Their job is to ensure the king is constantly entertained, constantly busy, constantly diverted.
Because if the king is left alone in silence, stripped of his distractions, he is just a frail man who is going to die.
A king without diversion is full of miseries.
He literally concludes that the only good thing for men, therefore, is to be diverted from thinking of what they are.
We are a tragic species.
We really are. We build massive civilizations, we compose symphonies, we conquer continents, all basically as an elaborate coping mechanism to avoid sitting quietly in a room.
But here is where Pascal's dialectical genius shines. He doesn't just leave the reader in the gutter entirely humiliated.
Right, because if he only focused on our wretchedness, we would just become depressed animals.
Exactly. So he pivots, and he introduces the paradox.
Yeah.
The greatness of man.
So if we are just miserable creatures running from our own shadow, where does our greatness come from?
His answer is a total brain twister, but it makes perfect sense. In fragment 114, he states that man's greatness comes precisely from the fact that he knows he is wretched.
Okay, unpack that.
As he puts it, a tree does not know it is wretched. A ruined house doesn't know it is ruined.
It is wretched to know that one is wretched, but there is greatness in knowing one is wretched.
Which leads to what is undoubtedly the most poetic and famous metaphor in the entire text.
The thinking raid.
Yes, found in fragments 113 and 200.
I want everyone listening to just picture this. Pascal says man is only a reed, a thin stalk of grass growing by the water.
We are physically the weakest thing in nature.
It doesn't take a massive cosmic event to kill us. A single drop of water, a passing vapor, an invisible virus is entirely sufficient to wipe us out.
But, Pascal says, we are a thinking reed.
Right. If the entire physical universe were to rise up and crush a human being, the human being would still be nobler, still be greater than the universe that destroys him. Because the human being knows he is dying. The universe, for all its massive physical power, knows absolutely nothing.
It's beautiful. All of our dignity, therefore, consists in thought. It is not in space or in time, which we can never fill, but in our consciousness.
Yet this incredible faculty of thought is utterly tracked by its physical limitations.
Which he illustrates in fragment 199, where he describes the disproportion of man.
Let's slow down here because this concept induces actual vertigo.
It really does. Remember, Pascal, the scientist, is writing in the era when the telescope and the early microscope are radically shifting our understanding of scale.
Right, so he asks you to look up at the infinite vastness of the universe, the staggering, unquantifiable distances of the stars and the planets.
You look at that infinity, and you feel like a speck of dust.
But then he asks you to look downward. Take the smallest insect you can find, a tiny mite. Look at its legs, the veins in its legs, the blood in those veins, the drops in that blood.
He says there is an entire infinity of microscopic parts going down forever.
And man is suspended in the terrifying, precarious middle.
We are caught between two unimaginable extremes. As Pascal writes, we are a nothing compared to the infinite, a whole compared to the nothing.
We are stranded. We cannot comprehend the microscopic nothingness from which we emerged, and we cannot grasp the massive infinity in which we are engulfed.
And this spatial disproportion perfectly mirrors our intellectual disproportion.
Right. Our reason is fundamentally incapable of grasping ultimate truth.
To prove this, Pascal pits the two dominant philosophical schools of his day against each other.
The dogmatists and the skeptics.
Exactly. The dogmatists, like Descartes, claim that human reason is powerful enough to arrive at certain absolute truths about the universe.
While the skeptics, or the Pyrrhonists, following philosophers like Montaigne, argue the exact opposite.
They say our senses deceive us so often, and we are so prone to error that we cannot be absolutely certain of anything.
We can't even prove we aren't dreaming right now.
And Pascal looks at this debate and realizes they both destroy each other.
You cannot be a true absolute skeptic, because nature itself intervenes. Our natural instincts and our helpless reliance on physical reality stop us from genuinely doubting our own existence.
But you cannot be a true dogmatist either, because the skeptics are right about how weak our reason actually is. Reason cannot prove its own foundational principles.
So Pascal just throws up his hands and cries out in frustration.
Yeah.
What sort of freak then is man? How novel, how monstrous, how chaotic, how paradoxical, how prodigious.
Judge of all things, feeble earthworm, repository of truth, sink of doubt and error, glory and refuse of the universe.
It is a stunning rhetorical peak. He has completely dismantled the arrogant intellectual.
Completely.
But wait, if I am an intellectual reading this in 1660, or just a listener today, I'm going to push back.
What would you say?
I would say, okay, Pascal, you've proved I'm a tangled, hopeless mess of contradictions. I'm too smart to be an animal, but too flawed to be an angel. I'm constantly distracting myself from my own misery. But if my reason is this broken, and I'm stranded between two infinities, how do you expect me to find a way out? You haven't given me a map, you've just proved that all maps are fake. Isn't this just a trap?
It is exactly a trap. It is a trap by design.
He wanted us here.
Yes. Pascal is using a dialectical method to intentionally exhaust the reader. He explains his strategy in fragment 130.
What does he say?
If he exalts himself, I humble him. If he humbles himself, I exalt him, and I go on contradicting him until he understands that he is a monster that passes all understanding.
He is deliberately creating a state of restless, agonizing dissatisfaction.
He wants to break your reliance on human philosophy so thoroughly that revelation becomes the only logical next step.
We've stripped away vanity, we've exposed the absolute emptiness of our distractions, we've crashed the operating system of human reason.
The ground is now prepared.
Which brings us to the pivot. Pascal introduces a radically different way of approaching the problem of existence.
And this leads to arguably the most famous and most debated intellectual gambit in history.
Pascal's wager.
Yes. Found in fragment 418. The wager is not just a theological argument. It is recognized today as a foundational text in modern decision theory and game theory.
Pascal sets up the parameters so perfectly. He says, look, we have established that human reason is infinitely separated from God.
Reason cannot prove God exists, and reason cannot prove God doesn't exist.
It is like a coin spinning in the air at the end of an infinite distance. It will eventually come up heads or tails, but you cannot see it.
But the catch is, you must wager.
You cannot abstain from betting. You cannot say, I'll just wait for more data.
No, you are, as Pascal phrases it, already embarked on the ship. You are alive, moving toward death, and every day you live, you are implicitly making a choice about how the universe works.
Since you are forced to bet, let's look at the mathematics of the gamble. You have two choices. Wager that God exists, or wager that he does not.
What are the potential payouts?
Let's say you wager that God exists, and you lead a life of faith and charity. If you win, if God does exist, you gain an infinite payout, eternal happiness.
And if you lose, if there is no God?
What have you actually lost? You've given up some finite worldly pleasures, perhaps some toxic vices, but you lose nothing of ultimate significance.
And on the flip side,
if you wager that God does not exist, if you are right, you gain a few decades of finite worldly pleasures.
but if you are wrong, you lose everything.
Yeah.
You miss out on the infinite payout.
Pascal's mathematical point is this. Whenever you have a gamble where the potential gain is infinite and the potential loss is finite, it is mathematically irrational to get on anything other than the infinite.
Even if the odds of God existing are 1 in a million, the expected value of an infinite payout dictates that you make the bet.
It is pure expected value calculation.
But let's be real here. A skeptic reading this, then or now, is going to immediately object.
Oh, totally. They are going to say, hold on, faith isn't a light switch. My hands are tied. I am just wired in such a way that I physically cannot believe something just because the math tells me it's a good deal.
Right.
And wouldn't an omniscient God see right through that fake, pragmatic, cynical bet anyway?
Pascal entirely anticipates that exact objection. He knows you cannot simply force your intellect to believe on command.
We are not purely rational creatures.
Exactly. We are physical, habitual creatures. So he offers a deeply psychological, almost behaviorist remedy that predates modern psychology by centuries.
He tells the skeptic, you recognize the math, you want to find faith, but your passions and your deeply ingrained habits are blocking you.
You need to tame what he calls the machine.
The machine. He means our physical bodies and our unconscious reflexes.
Yes. He tells the skeptic to act as if they believe. Go to Mass, take holy water, say the prayers.
Go through the physical motions. Why?
Because the mind and the body are deeply connected. By engaging in the physical practices of religion, you condition your reflexes.
You diminish the passions that cloud your judgment.
You use the brute force of bodily habit to break down the mind's arrogant resistance.
It is not about faking it to trick God. It is about physically preparing the heart to be receptive to grace.
Which perfectly transitions into what is absolutely the most crucial framework for understanding Pascal's entire worldview.
If you are listening to this and you want to truly unlock how Pascal's universe works, you have to understand his concept of the three orders.
He maps this out explicitly in fragment 308.
Pascal argues that all of human experience and reality is divided into three distinct, incommensurable realms.
First, there is the order of the body, or the flesh. This is the physical world, governed by material wealth, political power, violence, and kings.
Second is the order of the mind, or the intellect. This is the realm of scientists, philosophers, and mathematical geniuses. It is governed by reason and logic.
And third is the order of the heart, or charity. This is the spiritual realm, governed by holiness, divine love, and grace.
The absolute key word here is incommensurable.
What does that mean in this context?
It means these orders do not overlap. They cannot be translated into one another. Pascal, leaning on his background in geometry, explains it brilliantly.
With the dimensions, right.
Yeah. In geometry, you have a one-dimensional line, you have a two-dimensional square, you have a three-dimensional cube.
Right.
You cannot add a bunch of lines together to create a square, no matter how many lines you have. They exist in completely different dimensions.
And he applies this geometrically strict logic to human greatness. Intellectual greatness, the achievements of the mind, is completely invisible to those who only operate in the order of the body.
A brutal warlord or a superficial king does not care how good you are at calculus if you don't have an army. The philosopher's greatness doesn't register in the physical realm.
And in the exact same way, the greatness of charity, the holiness of the heart, is completely invisible to those who only admire intellectual greatness.
A brilliant, arrogant scientist cannot comprehend the spiritual majesty of a humble, illiterate saint.
You cannot use deductive logic to prove love, just as you cannot use physical swords to prove a mathematical theorem.
They are different dimensions of reality.
This forces us to carefully analyze the role of human reason within this specific framework, because Pascal is not anti-reason.
Not at all. He loves reason. He is one of the greatest scientists of his generation. Within the order of the mind, reason is supreme.
It organizes empirical facts, it builds calculators, it measures atmospheric pressure.
But reason has hard boundaries. It cannot cross over into the order of the heart.
And here is the twist. Reason actually depends on the heart to function at all.
In fragment 110, Pascal writes, "We know the truth not only through our reason, but also through our heart."
He is making a profound point about epistemology, how we know what we know.
He points out that reason needs first principles to start working. How do you prove that there are three dimensions of space?
Or how do you mathematically prove the concept of time, or motion, or the existence of numbers?
You can't. You intuitively feel them. The heart perceives these foundational realities instantly.
And then reason takes those intuitive foundations and builds logical proofs upon them.
Exactly. The heart is not just the seat of sloppy emotion. For Pascal, the heart is the faculty of immediate intuitive knowledge.
It perceives ultimate truths that deductive reason simply cannot reach.
As he famously states in fragment 423, the heart has its reasons of which reason knows nothing.
Reason's ultimate, most noble achievement is recognizing that there are an infinite number of things that surpass it.
So reason bows to the heart.
And once Pascal has guided his reader to this point, once he has broken down our reliance on vanity, exposed our diversions, trapped us between infinities, presented the wager, and explained the three orders,
He finally brings out his actual defense of Christianity. This is the apology.
the latter half of the Pensées is dedicated to empirical historical proofs that the order of charity has intersected with human history.
Now, we must approach this section with the analytical distance we established at the beginning.
Right, because to a modern reader, these historical and biblical arguments often feel alien, or even like the weakest part of the text.
But to understand Pascal's conceptual machine, we have to see how they function for him. He builds his case heavily on 17th century biblical interpretation.
Yes. For instance, he looks at the Old Testament, and he points to the survival and dispersion of the Jewish people as a standing miracle.
In his view, the fact that the Jewish people preserved their scriptures with such incredibly rigorous fidelity over thousands of years, even while enduring exile and persecution, was visible, empirical proof of divine providence at work in history.
Furthermore, he relies on a method of biblical interpretation called hermeneutics, specifically a typological hermeneutic, which he calls figures.
Oh, walk us through how that works mechanically.
Well, Pascal believed that the Old Testament has a dual nature. It has a literal meaning and a figurative spiritual meaning.
So when the Old Testament speaks of God promising earthly kingdoms, physical wealth, or military victories to the Jewish people,
those promises are literal on one level, but they're actually figures, symbols or shadows, pointing to a higher spiritual reality, the coming of Christ and the spiritual kingdom of heaven.
But if I'm reading that today, my immediate reaction is, Pascal, isn't that just a massive confirmation bias? You're taking texts written centuries earlier and retroactively forcing them to fit your narrative. If the text says earthly kingdom, why not just take it at face value?
Pascal anticipates that exact critique, and his answer is fascinating. He argues that this dual meaning, this ambiguity, is entirely intentional on God's part.
It is a lock and key system.
Yes. He claims that the texts were written in such a way that those who only cared about physical power and wealth, those stuck in the order of the body or carnal mindsets, would read the prophecies and expect a physical, military messiah.
Their own worldly desires would blind them.
But those who were seeking God with the heart would look past the literal shadows and see the spiritual truth.
The text itself serves as a filter. It reveals truth to those who want it and obscures it from those who are blinded by pride.
And he doesn't just rely on ancient texts. He brings in physical contemporary miracles.
And we aren't talking about abstract theories. In fragment 846, he boldly asserts that the whole of faith rests on miracles.
This is deeply tied to a massive, life-altering event in his own family, the miracle of the Holy Thorn.
This context is vital. Remember the fierce political and theological war between Pascal's Jansenist friends at Port Royal and the powerful Jesuits.
During the height of this conflict, when it looked like the Jansenists were going to be crushed by the church establishment, Pascal's own niece, Marguerite Perrier, was suffering from a horrific medical condition.
She had a severe eye fistula.
A completely grotesque weeping ulcer in the corner of her eye that had been rotting the bone for over 3 years.
The best surgeons in Paris had given up on it and were planning to essentially cauterize it with hot irons as a last resort.
Yes. And on March 24th, 1656, a relic believed to be a physical thorn from the crown of thorns worn by Christ was brought to the Port Royal convent.
They applied the reliquary to Marguerite's eye.
Within days, the ulcer vanished completely. The tissue healed, the bone restored. It was sudden and total.
And this wasn't just a rumor.
No, the leading surgeons of Paris, and eventually the ecclesiastical authorities, examined her and officially authenticated it as a miracle.
Imagine being Pascal. You are a scientist who demands empirical proof. And right in your living room, the niece you love is cured of an incurable disease, just as your theological faction is facing annihilation.
For Pascal, this was not a happy medical anomaly. It was a direct, irrefutable intervention by God.
It was the divine reaching down into the physical world, the order of the body, to violently authenticate the truth of the order of charity.
For him, miracles were the ultimate empirical data points of the spiritual realm. They were the collision of the three orders.
Now, while modern listeners might struggle with biblical typology or literal relic miracles, it is essential to understand that for Pascal, these weren't isolated superstitions.
They were converging arguments. History, psychology, probability, scripture, and contemporary miracles all mathematically pointing toward the exact same center.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. We've mapped the chaotic genius of this man. We've seen how he cuts down vanity, diagnoses our dread, calculates the wager, and structures the universe.
What is the legacy of the Pensées?
Right. What do these fragmented 17th century notes mean for us today, living in the 21st century?
The philosophical legacy is monumental. Even if a modern reader completely strips away the Jansenism, the Catholic apologetics, and the biblical typology, Pascal's raw diagnosis of human psychology remains a towering achievement.
His observations on our frantic flight from the present moment.
The terrifying role of the imagination in constructing our political and social realities.
And the absurdity of human vanity. They directly provided the bedrock for later philosophical giants.
You cannot have the existentialism of Søren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, or Jean-Paul Sartre without the groundwork laid by Blaise Pascal.
And the wager, as we discussed, birthed modern decision theory.
Economists, mathematicians, game theorists, they all look back to fragment 418 as the foundational attempt to formalize rational decision-making under conditions of total, infinite uncertainty.
Furthermore, his framework of the three orders acts as a brilliant, incredibly prescient warning against what we now call scientism.
Scientism is the mistaken, arrogant belief that the hard sciences and deductive reasoning can and should answer our moral, spiritual, and existential questions.
Pascal, one of the greatest scientists to ever live, drew a hard, permanent boundary around science.
He reminds us that knowing the mechanical layout of the solar system or understanding the chemical composition of the brain does not console you in times of deep emotional affliction.
The mind cannot heal the heart.
So is the Pensées still relevant?
I would argue his diagnosis is actually more terrifyingly accurate today than it was in 1660.
Think about his concept of diversion.
He said the king needs a courtier to constantly entertain him so he doesn't have to face the terror of the infinite. What is the modern equivalent of the courtier?
It is the supercomputer in your pocket. It is the algorithm. It is the infinite scroll.
We have constructed an entire multi-trillion-dollar global economy predicated entirely on capturing human attention.
We have built machines designed specifically to keep the mind perpetually stimulated, perpetually diverted, so that we never have to face our own wretchedness.
We are still fleeing the present moment, but now we have infinitely more efficient tools to ensure we never have to sit quietly in a room.
The poet T.S. Eliot famously wrote about the Pensées, stating that it is a work that makes us realize how superficial are our own views of life.
Pascal refuses to let us settle into comfortable illusions. He won't let us be purely proud because he exposes our frailty.
But he won't let us be purely despairing because he insists on the phenomenal greatness of our consciousness.
We are forced to live in the tension of the thinking reed.
If there is a final thought to leave you with, it revolves around Pascal's concept of the Deus absconditus, the hidden God.
Pascal suggests that what we see in the physical world indicates neither the total absence of divinity nor its manifest blinding presence.
Instead, it indicates a presence that is deliberately hidden, waiting in the shadows to be sought by the heart.
And it raises a haunting question for us today. How much of our modern, hyper-connected, relentlessly noisy technological world is specifically, if unconsciously, designed to keep us so constantly diverted that we never pause long enough to look for what is hidden in the silence?
We spend our lives building maps to give ourselves an illusion of control.
But maybe the most courageous thing we can do is put down the map, turn off the screen, sit quietly in a room without our diversions, and face the terrifying, beautiful unknown within ourselves.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you reach for your phone.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the brilliantly fragmented mind of Blaise Pascal.